I do feel like I'm a pretty typical dark autumn, and color analysis works pretty well for me, but I don't presume that this is going to work as neatly for everyone else. Recording. Welcome to the Style Toolkit. Let me just reassure you, I really am fond of color analysis. I use it on myself, and I've used it on other people, but the Style Toolkit is about using style systems as tools and not as dogma. So today I want to share with you some concerns or possible shortcomings that there might be with color analysis, because I think it's important as a style consultant that I look at things from every angle and do what is best for the client. But first, a quick recap of color analysis if you are new to this. The system recommends a distinct color palette to be used depending on your skin undertone and other chromatic aspects of your skin, hair, eye color. These color palettes were named after the 4 seasons. Winter colors are cool, meaning primarily blue-based. We are working with this side right here of the color wheel, and these colors are bright, and traditionally winter colors are also thought to lean dark. Black and white are often considered winter colors because of the intense contrast that they provide, as are royal blues, purples, magenta, fuchsia, and more blue-based reds and blue-based greens. As you can see, reds and greens are split across the cool and warm sides of the color wheel. Spring is warm, so primarily colors from the opposite side of the color wheel. The colors are bright, but usually light to medium in value, not dark. These include yellows, oranges, coral pinks, tomato reds, yellow greens. Summer is cool, so blue-based like winter, but thought to be either lighter in value or softer in terms of chroma. It's a bit more muted. So the colors can be light and also more grayish, but more on this later. You could think of summer palette as consisting of soft blues, lavenders, baby pinks, gray of course, aqua, navy, and of course any reds and greens should be again more blue-based, but a bit more gentle in comparison to winter reds and greens. Finally, autumn is a warm season, so the colors are also yellow-based like spring, but autumn is thought to also be on the softer side with colors like beige, brown, and olive green, but also colors that are a bit more vibrant but significantly darker than spring, such as mustard yellow, burnt orange, and forest green. But a 12-season approach is becoming increasingly popular, breaking each of the 4 seasons into further 3 subseasons to account for variations in how much brightness and depth a person might need. So here's a list of 10 things that I think are important to flag. Number 1, there is a lack of standardization. Although color theory is pretty well established in design, art, visual communication in general, color analysis really should just be an application of color theory in fashion and taking human skin tones into consideration. When it comes to color analysis, what we have are scattered actors and different competing systems, and there is often a lot of conflicting information. Originally, we had 4 seasons. Nowadays, the 12-season system is more popular, but there's actually more than one. I know at least 2 of them. And I've heard of people adding additional categories, so now there's 16, 18, 20 subseasons. And some color analysts might really emphasize hair and eye color, while others will exclusively consider the skin. David Zyla works with a seasonal system, but he gets people to look at the color of their iris and the lip and the color of how their skin flushes, and so it's this idea of matching your colors to those that you find in your body. And this in itself is not inherently bad. It is okay that people are exploring these different avenues and have different points of view, but this means that for the average person who just wants to know what is their season or sub-season, it's going to be a bit confusing, and they might run into conflicting information and even be sent on the wrong path. And so it is also not uncommon for someone to get their colors done by different professionals and get completely different results. The second issue that I think is worth flagging is that there can be some confusion with regards to chroma and value. Seasonal color analysis doesn't just look at whether you have a warm or a cool undertone, meaning what kind of hue do you have, more yellow-based or more blue-based. It also looks at chroma, or the clarity. Is your skin tone clear and therefore it suits brighter colors, or is it more muted and therefore your colors need to be muted? And it looks at value, meaning how light or dark a color is. So here's the thing. The word soft gets thrown around a lot, and it's not always clear what is meant by that. So sometimes when people use the word soft, they mean muted. So in terms of chroma, there's a lot of gray mixed in, so the color is not very clear. But then I also noticed that sometimes it just means any color that is light. Even dark colors can be called soft because by adding black pigment, you're also taking away some of that vibrancy. So essentially, tints, tones, and shades. When you take a color in its most saturated form and you add white, you have a tint. We might think of them as pastels. So while these colors do lose a bit of vibrancy, they're still quite radiant because you're adding white to them, and white is very luminous. And this is very different from adding gray. The gray will, yes, soften the color, but now the color looks dusty. And so it looks a bit more delicate and gentle and not as radiant. And if you add black, you end up with a color that is dark, heavier and sharper and more contrasted, more crisp. Than say if you added some dark gray, then the color is dark, but again, it has that dustiness. And so it does look more muted, less saturated. So all of this is kind of creating this confusion where what is it that you mean by the word soft? So in Color Me Beautiful, the book by Carol Jackson that kind of kicked off the color analysis craze back in the 1980s, she's describing autumn and winter as darker seasons and spring and summer as lighter seasons, but then autumn and summer are also muted and spring and winter are brighter. So this leaves the question, what if summer is just a little too dusty for you and winter too dark, but you know you're cool, you know you're light, your colors just need to be a bit more radiant. Or perhaps the summer colors are too light and you need them to be darker, but winter is too bright, so you need your colors to be a bit dusty, but just a bit darker. Perhaps she thought that people tend to just fall into those four patterns, but it hasn't really aligned with my experience. Number 3, the space is filled with a lot of sweeping generalizations. All olives are cool-toned, redheads have warm skin, and blondes cannot be winters or autumns. And depending on the color analyst, if you're any ethnicity other than Caucasian, you're automatically placed in the winter category if you have black hair and dark features. Accurate depiction of human skin is something very complex that painters struggle to learn, and I'm concerned that maybe seasonal color analysis, when it was presented to us back in the 80s, it was sort of like this system that is already complete and closed in on itself, and so all you have to do is deduce, whereas maybe inductive reasoning instead of deductive reasoning is called for, which is just looking at whatever new evidence comes before we get so closed off and ready to make these generalizations. I remember seeing a Reddit thread that was dedicated for people who have olive skin, and they did a survey, and the majority of people were split along dark winter, dark autumn, and then you had this other group of people who were more along split between also cool and warm, but softer seasons. If you can think of any other particular cases that you think are worth discussing, let me know in the comments. Number 4, Finding your best colors may really be more of an art than a science. Colors do interplay with each other in ways that are studied formally in color theory. We know, for instance, that colors that are opposite to each other on a color wheel, they make each other pop when they're next to each other. So we do know that. It's not that there isn't any objectivity. But when we're talking about clothes, there might be other factors to consider. Wearing black might make you feel that your features look a bit more chiseled. If you have a lot of angularity and sharpness, black could highlight that, and perhaps you like that. And perhaps someone wears black and this is what they notice, but then they wear light pastels and it brings out a completely different vibe. They look angelic, but then they put on something warm and you notice the warm reflections in their hair. There could potentially be a variety of factors that make a color look interesting on you, other than just color season. I do feel like I'm a pretty typical dark autumn and color analysis works pretty well for me, but I don't presume that this is going to work as neatly for everyone else. I would instead use seasonal color analysis as a starting point, but remain open to the possibility that some people might need a more personalized approach. Number 5, some colors might work better as accent colors, meaning you might not want to wear them head to toe. You might not want to wear a dress or a coat in a given color. Maybe red is too intense for you, but you like it as an accent, as a lipstick color. Or, like take something like this. This is brown, but there's some orange stripes, and it's quite subtle, but it's just there to give a bit of pop of color. And perhaps if the whole outfit was that color of orange, maybe it wouldn't have the same effect on me. If you're a bright season, you might not also want to wear bright colors head to toe, so you might also want to sprinkle in some bright colors here and there and have some softer colors to pair them with. You might also find that you can wear a beige or a gray as long as you have some sparkle as well, or perhaps the fabric has a sheen. So let's also consider proportions and let's consider colors in their context. Number 6, we don't see you from the neck up. Unless you're in Zuckerberg's metaverse, we see all of you. So often we hear people say, wear your best colors next to your face. And I understand the logic of this, but let's say I buy a skirt and the color doesn't flatter me. Now, if I'm wearing a skirt and presuming I'm not wearing tights, you're going to see my leg, and that skirt is going to look separate from my leg. It's not going to be very flattering. If I wear nail polish in a color that clashes with my skin tone, that's also not going to be very pleasant. And then you also have to consider that a bottom piece that isn't a color that doesn't dialogue, that doesn't complement the rest of your wardrobe, you will struggle to incorporate that piece because it's just not going to feel very intuitive and easy knowing how to pair that. Also, perhaps having a bottom piece in your color palette that might perhaps make a top that is not on your color palette seem a bit more workable, because now you've created this kind of color sandwich. Think about like someone who has very pale skin but black hair, and maybe they put a white dress and it feels a little separate, but then maybe if you put a black belt and some black shoes and a black bag, now the color of your hair is being repeated in the outfit, so things look like they tie in a bit more. So it's not necessarily always about having something next to your neck. It is about the entire look feeling cohesive. Number 7, color analysis is obviously prone to bias. So I think that the reason why, for instance, we see celebrities being typed differently depending on which website you go to. Let's say you find a photo of a celebrity and you think, okay, let's call him John Doe. You find a photo of John Doe and he's wearing a gray hoodie and you think he looks fine, so you're gonna type him as a summer. Someone else, however, thinks he looks amazing in olive green. So you build this case in favor of John Doe being a summer by cherry-picking photos that support your case. And this other person who thinks that he looks great in olive will do the same, but to support their thesis that John Doe is an autumn. And another way in which bias can creep in, I know of people who think that most people, the overwhelming majority of people, are cool-toned. I even heard someone mention, I think on a YouTube video, but I'm sorry, I don't remember who, but they said that there was this personal stylist who had been in the industry for very long, and they said nobody looks good in warm tones. So this is what I think might be happening. I think some people might be biased against yellows and oranges because these are notoriously difficult colors. I'm warm-toned, but orange is tricky for me unless it's like a terracotta, and most shades of yellow don't work for me because yellow is super bright. So a lot of us have warm-toned skin, but approaching neutral. So maybe more comfortable in a paprika red, a brick orange, instead of like a full-on yellow or a bright, like a traffic cone orange. Perhaps you've heard that if you're called to go on television, you'll be advised to wear a jewel tone. And jewel tones, normally most of them are cool leaning. They tend to be a bit dark, but they're not as harsh as black. But they're also not so bright because they're a bit darker. So yes, jewel tones are flattering on a lot of people, but that's not to say that everyone is cool toned. I just want to remind you that like magenta is also a difficult color. A lot of people look horrible, myself included. I look horrible in light gray, and cyan. Cyan is also like yellow, cyan, and magenta are really bright, really intense colors. And a lot of people need colors that are a bit more muted or a bit darker. Number 8, blues are not warm, yellows are not cool. This is a contradiction. Now, look, yes, there are some blues that are going to be more flattering for me. If I am in autumn, I might reach for a warmer type of blue. Also, as a dark autumn, I might reach for a darker type of blue. And I also prefer to wear a violet red as opposed to a more cool toned, a more blue-based purple. So these are considerations. This means that my color palette has to have this shift towards more yellow-based colors and darker colors. But that's not to say that blue is warm and yellow is cool. It doesn't make sense. Think of it this way. The warmest blue will still have a lot more blue and a lot less yellow in it than the coolest of greens. So can we honestly say that that color is warm? I don't think so. But it is important to consider that if we were to only stick to one side of the color wheel and wear analogous colors, meaning colors that are next to each other in the color wheel, we would get bored. So it's nice to sprinkle in colors from other parts of the color wheel just so that our wardrobes feel more dimensional and that we don't feel so constricted. We also want to play with contrast, but contrast that enhances our skin color, not contrast that makes us notice dark circles and pimples and things like that. And then there's periwinkle, which is a color that sits in between blue and violet, so as cool as you can get. Yet this color appears repeatedly as a color recommended for people who are in the spring season. And I'm not against recommending periwinkle for people who are spring. I think it can often look really good, but please, this is a cool color. And I've seen some videos here on YouTube where they're doing the color draping and they'll include periwinkle when they're doing the spring colors. And almost invariably, if someone is cool toned, they won't look as good in the warm colors, but as soon as you put periwinkle, it looks good. And they'll be like, well, yeah, because it's cooler. Well, it's not cooler, it is cool. I mean, you don't get cooler than in that spectrum of blues and purples that are sitting next to each other on a color wheel, and the yellows and oranges that are also next to each other. Like, that's as warm as you can get, and the blue violets are as cool as you get. Reds and greens are more neutral, but orange yellows and blue violets, that's the extremes right there. Number 9, sometimes an outfit is just too good, too unique, too beautiful to pass up. And if that outfit is not precisely in our color season, It's worth considering the trade-off. Obviously, like if a color makes you feel like you look sick, I wouldn't recommend this. Maybe you can make that color work with some makeup, or in my case, I have a summer dress that is yellow, and that yellow is just a little too bright for me. It is a warm yellow, it's kind of like a marigold, so by far not the worst yellow I could use. But if we want to get technical, yes, I do look a little bit gray in it, but it's such a joyous dress and so great for the summer that, I don't know, like when I wear it, I'm willing to let the dress steal the show. And finally, number 10, what about storytelling? Winter colors feel bold, artistic, modern, and autumnal colors feel cozy, earthy, organic, spicy. Summer colors feel gentle, serene, and delicate, whereas spring colors are juicy, fruity, fun, and joyful. But what if these are not the stories that you want to tell? So suppose you do color analysis and you discover that you're a spring, a light spring, so your colors should be light, radiant, joyful, but you wish to wear nothing but Yohji Yamamoto. If you've seen The Breakfast Club, you know about the controversial makeover, or one of the characters spends most of the movie wearing this very dark, alternative, moody outfit. And finally she's given a makeover and they put her in these like pastels, very feminine colors, and people hate it. The dress that she was wearing before was really cool. If you have a preference for a dark, grungy look, being told to wear yellows and oranges and watermelon pinks and corals and tomato red, it might just not resonate with you. And I'm sure you've heard at some point that if you have a warm-toned skin, then brown is your version of black. And if we're just considering what is best for our skin tone, sure, I think that's a reasonable idea that you can work with. However, if we want to think about the cultural significance of these colors, they are radically different. Black is sleek, urban, modern, dark, a bit melancholic and severe. Brown is cozier and organic, earthy, inviting, and it can also make us think of historical times. You know, this is why steampunk borrows brown heavily instead of black. They want to transport you back in time. So we have to consider the cultural significance, the associations we make with colors, and whether these are in alignment with what we are trying to communicate visually through our clothes. You might not want to show up to a boardroom meeting or a courtroom if you're a lawyer wearing bright, fruity, citrusy colors. You might feel that wearing a gray suit is more appropriate if you're going to be taken seriously, and to also show respect and formality that the occasion demands of you. The point of color analysis is to figure out which colors look as though they blend in more and make your skin glow, but that's not necessarily everyone's priority and objective.